Yeah, what's up, guys? It's casual. And it's that time of life again. I'm answering questions that were sent in by you. 4 years ago, I made my first long-form talking video where I answered viewers' questions over a comfy blanket of emotional music and mesmerizing lo-fi visuals. It felt cathartic for me to dump all of the ideas that I could into those suggested topics. But an unexpected result of that video were the people who left comments on how they were able to relate to it, or at the least get some kind of valuable food for thought. When I started making videos, I always had a passive hope that people would see them, but I never considered nor expected that it would become a way for me to connect with people who were actually similar to me. And somehow, slowly through the years, as more people have seen my videos and I continue to show myself in them, I've managed to attract an audience of people I actually think are incredibly interesting, and that I really feel like I have some shared common ground with, which is something that has never been plentiful or easy to find, in real life or on the internet. Whoever you are, you're here, and seem to be down with what I'm down with, and that's not insignificant. I don't try to be inaccessible, and I'd like to think I make things that have the capability of reaching a bigger audience. But we can't deny this is a fringe channel for fringe people by a fringe person. I've literally met people through my videos that have become my friends, and that's fucking cool. When I think back to that first time I asked for questions and topic suggestions, compared to the experience I just had putting together this edition, it's really insane to me how far this channel has come. I really wanted to up the ante this time and asked you to send in your question as a voice recording, which you think would really decrease the amount of people who submit questions, but I still received so many. And not just any questions, but really fantastic, meaningful, and interesting questions. It makes me happy and also proud to know that I have such a discerning audience. Before we get into it, as a disclaimer, I don't always reply to the initial question as explicitly as I'd like in retrospect, and sometimes I go on long tangents that stem from that original topic, and I hope you don't mind. There are some limits to this format in terms of how precisely I can give the questioner what they were really looking for. Assuming they were looking for a particular solution at all, they may have just wanted to invite some brainstorming around it, which is fine. But because I'm unable to ask them follow-up questions and poke around for more context or specifications like one would be able to in a real conversation, it's not perfect. So, apologies if I went in a direction you didn't want. And you're welcome if I did. Big thank you to everyone who submitted questions and was a part of this collaboration.
Hey Casual, it's your pal Bumfreeze. What do you think of the DMT clockwork elves? Like, are they real? Are they aliens? Are they the afterlife? What do you think, man?
Right off the bat, I would say that the DMT clockwork elves are real. But there may be an important distinction between what kind of real they are. Do people have real experiences where they interact with clockwork elves that are just as real to them as interacting with other humans? Yes, I think so. I haven't done DMT myself, but there are enough accounts that if you actually look into it, I would consider it overly cynical and unrealistic to not accept that these experiences are real. However, there is some ground in arguing that the experience is not real in the objective sense, that these entities are just random hallucinations of the mentally ill or psychoactively enhanced consciousness. But this is still just a loose claim, as you can't even prove that the reality you exist in now is a shared objective experience. All you can truly validate 100% without any skepticism is the reality of your experience. Is what you're experiencing right now real? Of course, how could it not be? Falsehood is a concept that only exists within your fundamental base reality, which you are experiencing. But there is plenty of fair argument to be had either way as to whether or not clockwork elves or any other alleged entity are really in another dimension that anyone can access that is as real as our own, or if they are an extension, a creation, invitation, or projection of our own consciousness. But I don't think that distinction matters as much as it seems it does. Let's say that your existing reality isn't a real objective plane of existence that other people share, and you are all that exists, and everything is a projection of your own consciousness. What difference does it make? It's just an idea about the nature of reality. That reality, whether being something you are inside or something that is inside of you, is equally real. I was lucky enough to stumble on a channel called 434 on its first or second upload, and have watched the channel grow somewhat from a distance. The main topics of discussion on the channel are synchronicities, psychedelics, paranormal phenomenon, and general self-improvement with what could probably be called a new age tinge. The creator of these videos makes a very serious claim that interactions with these interdimensional entities, sometimes referred to as clockwork elves, have completely changed his life and have chosen him to help spread their message of love and help raise the frequency of humans on Earth. It definitely sounds a bit chosen one-y and religious, but I wouldn't doubt the sincerity of this guy for a minute. I totally accept that he has experienced these things and believes it all, just like we all believe and accept the premises of our own lives. So what I'm saying is, it's real for people like him who have experiences with clockwork elves, but should it be real for us? Should we take the message of the clockwork elves seriously that he is conveying? Should we attempt to communicate with them ourselves? And that is something you have to decide for yourself. I think for a lot of people who are yet to fully actualize, which is essentially 99.9% of people, there's an exciting allure to the supernatural, to spiritualism, to the occult. And I agree, I get it. It's really exciting if any of that stuff is real. I've certainly spent more time looking into and thinking about those things than the average Joe, and I have somewhat of a suspicion that the concepts of aliens, of demons, of interdimensional spirits, and the experiences of a schizophrenic, of a psychedelic user, or a shaman, all cross paths and may ultimately be alluding to the same thing. There's an interesting article you can read about entities you meet on psychedelics actually being demons that trick you into killing yourself. I will link in the description. The more I've been aware of these things, the more overlap starts to show up. What that thing, or those things, all are exactly is the question, which I can't answer for you. Are all spiritual interdimensional phenomena demons? Are they all aliens? Do both exist? Neither? In the end, all these different categories are merely terms and concepts. We call ourselves humans, but there's no reason that a bird or a dolphin wouldn't know us by a different name, or have a variety of different names for what is ultimately the same phenomena. When I was younger, I was more drawn to these kind of topics, and driven by the excitement of what if it was true. I think in my case, I was hoping the end of the rabbit hole would solve some of my existential concerns. Is there a greater reason to why I exist? Do I have a spirit? Or am I just perceiving sensations as a manifestation of a physical form? If there is a greater reason to why I exist, what is it? Did I choose to exist in this reality? Why? There was a great appeal in the idea that I could take a drug or have a spiritual experience and talk to something that seems to be not from our realm, and it could give me any sort of insight that could help answer those questions. The longer I've sat with those difficult questions, the more comfortability and satisfaction I build up in not knowing the answers. I think an obsession with searching for greater meaning and thinking very existentially can be completely earnest and well-meaning. You're just searching for the truth, and that seems noble, doesn't it? But what if that obsessive search for truth was getting in the way of the truth that is all around you? The reality that is here, around you every day? What if it's causing you more harm than it would be help to know some esoteric truth? I think a lot of my philosophical obsessions with the nature of reality, and if there is true objectivity or purpose, comes from my uncertainty with what to do with my life. life can be this dauntingly beautiful thing. Unless you're completely convinced of reincarnation, we are here, it seems, for only a handful of years. We can do whatever we choose with it, and that's it. Even if you do believe in reincarnation, or accept the notion that you are a spiritual being and will continue to experience after this life, there's still a specialness to this one exact life that you are now living. And that's a fuck ton of pressure. Like, could you imagine a more grand opportunity than to be alive and conscious in the way that you are now? But here's the important thing that it's taken me a long time to realize. Don't take it so damn seriously. Ironically, I'll be touching upon the very opposite advice in a later question where I explain what you can do to take your life seriously. There are so many different combinations of this. You could be someone who is daunted by the special privilege of being alive and takes their life too seriously because of it. Or you could completely be overwhelmed by that realization and cope by taking your hands off the steering wheel. Continuing on to the epiphany that took me a lot of years of suffering to get to, don't take it so damn seriously. It's okay to have unanswered questions. I think we set ourselves up to believe we have to do something very special with this thing called life that we accept as a very special oddity and of an insane privilege to experience. Like become a Buddha, or make lots of money, or become an expert in something, or experience incomparable highs and abundant pleasures. But all of that is missing what the specialness of existence really is. The specialness of existence is just as much negotiating a $10,000 raise or being kept awake all night from an earth-shattering epiphany as it is feeling a light wind brisk your face or sleeping through an alarm in the morning. In the words of Master Oogway from the geniusly written film Kung Fu Panda, in order to make something special, you just have to believe it is special. Don't get paralyzed by the pressure of having to take advantage of being alive. And equally so, don't dissociate and give up. Think about the circumstances you're in right now, the power that you do have, the people you can influence, your potential, what you could say, what you could make, what you could do, what you could experience, and make the most of it. And while you're doing that, don't worry too much about having special things in your life, but instead, strive to see the specialness in everything.
Hello, Casual. How do you usually decide what is a good enough idea to make a video about? Do you write down all of your ideas, or is it more of a spontaneous thing for you?
In the past, I have written down ideas. There were a few times where I was stuck on a train or plane or something like that and decided to deliberately brainstorm in the Notes app on my phone. But those were very rare events. Generally, I just stored the ideas in my memory. And naturally, if I forget about them, it's usually because they didn't pass the threshold of excitingness needed to remember them. And if I continue to think about them and remember them again and again, it's a good indication that I will want to actually make them. However, I think most of my ideas are very spontaneous, and I think there is something powerful about being spontaneous and acting on inspiration when it first hits you. For a lot of my videos, they were made in a single day, and I just didn't stop working on it until it was done. Although I've gotten better at continuing projects, in the past I knew I wasn't very good at that, so my solution to that problem was to just finish the project as soon as I could, before I got sick of it. I think there's a pretty natural phenomenon many people are afflicted by, where they get excited by some idea, they start working on it, but don't finish it. And then for the next however many months, when they think about it, it's lost that light it once had in their mind, and it just seems unexciting, or like work. So one approach to handling that is laser focusing on the idea as soon as it's exciting, racing yourself to finish it before you get sick of it. And most of my videos were made with this spontaneous attitude where suddenly have an idea and decide to dive into it immediately. I believe something I hear in your question, though, is what makes an idea good enough to make it? And I think that's a bit of a dangerous mindset to have. In my process, the ideas that stay in my memory long enough to eventually get made aren't sticking around necessarily because they are good, but they stick around because they are exciting to me. About 10 years ago, Sam Hyde made one of his few serious vlog-style videos where he expressed his philosophy around ideas. It sounded like he spent a lot of time around people in the advertising world and marketing think tanks who essentially worship a sexy idea. So he grew to see the flaws and despise this concept, and he famously says that a good idea is a piece of shit. What he means is that how good your ideas are doesn't really matter. All that matters is if and how you execute them. This philosophy resonated as true with me for a long time, and I still think there's tremendous merit to it. In a lot of cases, I don't think the idea is what's very important, but rather it's how you communicate that idea, how you deliver that idea. Most of my videos aren't really that great of an idea. An emo song about TF2, commentating over Ninja Warrior, answering questions over music with lo-fi mesmerizing imagery or gameplay. But I think the merit of them is how I do it. Let's say you decide that you're going to make a video about the Scout from Team Fortress 2. A video that really anyone could make. That video could be such a wide range of things, but it depends on how you want it to be, what you want it to feel like, what you want to say about Scout. You could make a really terrible, boring video about Scout, but you could also make a video that makes people jump out of their seat and suddenly decide a career change that's about Scout. My advice to someone who is struggling with finding good ideas is to just commit to any idea. It doesn't have to be amazing, and try to make that idea the best it can be. I find that a lot of people who are less experienced with outputting creativity don't have less ideas than an expert creative. It's usually that they are less able to see the potential in the ideas that they already have. They often spend a lot of energy jumping around from idea to idea, hoping to find one that is just suddenly magic, instead of sticking with one of the ideas they already have, locking it in, and allowing their use of other variables to put it in a favorable light. I've noticed this phenomenon so often with musicians who are less experienced in writing, where they are playing around with ideas, trying to put a song together, but they can't seem to commit to even the first idea, and it just ends up exhausting a bunch of their energy. What's really cool about music or video is that the final result is more about how the individual elements work together than the individual elements themselves. You could purposely choose the least exciting, worst imaginable bass line to start a song, but make a variety of really engaging compositions depending on what the other instruments are doing on top of it. And I think the same can be said for video. Even if you have terrible footage or an uninteresting commentary, you could do all sorts of things with the other elements to make it an overall convincing work. And just to clarify, I kind of said previously that I mostly agreed with Sam Hyde's point, because there is something to be said for a great idea. Sometimes you're just suddenly inspired and the idea feels so compelling it's like the video or song just makes itself. A great idea is awesome, don't get me wrong, but it's not the entire equation, and it's not even necessary to make something great. So, in short, if you're struggling with finding good ideas, stop worrying about if the idea is actually good. Commit to an idea and spend your energy brainstorming how you could make that idea into something great. The more time you spend actually doing, actually creating, the easier it will become to make things, quote unquote, good.
Hi Casual, my name's Rombe, and my question is, what has been the most captivating or perhaps favorite nightmare that you've had? Thank you, I love your channel.
I would generally describe the theme of many of my nightmares as being stressful situations I have to endure or attempt to escape. When I think of favorites, I can only bring to mind my most memorable nightmares, as my once razor-sharp memory has deteriorated with age, and those memorable nightmares that are left all come from a particular era, around the time between my first 2 long-form talking videos in 2016. In one dream, I was riding on a flat train car, attached to the main engine train, on a particularly dangerous track. I was one of dozens of other men riding on this flat car. The track was exceptionally chaotic and would have large bumps that would send the cart flying like 10 feet into the air for a moment before the flat car fell violently back down to the track. It was very challenging and required nimbleness to stay on the flat car when this happened. It happened one final time and came crashing down with the largest force yet, and I realized that everyone else who was previously on the flat car died from the impact. There was a similar dream where I was the lone survivor of a plane crash. There was also a dream where I was in a dark dungeon-like prison, oozing with darkness and barbed wire, while I tried to escape, having no choice but to listen to the voice of some evil entity trying to intimidate and capture me. I ended up escaping out of the roof of the prison and jumping to the first surrounding perimeter fence/gate. And then I had to do that 2 more times, as there were 3 layers of gates surrounding this evil prison, all while being taunted by this evil voice. I barely made the jump each time, and when I finally reached the 3rd gate fence thing, which was probably 30 feet high, I threw myself off and slid to the ground. But I quickly realized I was tied to the fence with a rope. I now saw that I was in a dark park with rolling grass hills and a few trees. It was nighttime. There was a nearby road where a car quickly drove past me as I screamed for help. I ran away from the fence, the rope attaching me to it stretching out the further I dug my heels into the earth and ran away from it. I dove into the silhouette of a person that suddenly revealed itself in front of me, and the dream ended before I could grab onto them. Finally, there was also a dream from that era where I was driving 2 cars simultaneously and had to dodge changes in the road as well as oncoming traffic. That was a very unique dream because it was like I had 2 scenes that were overlaid simultaneously that I was a part of at the same time. When I say I was driving 2 cars at the same time, I don't mean like my hands were stretching to reach 2 separate steering wheels of different cars in the same setting. It's like there were 2 iterations of the same scenario, this car driving, that I was experiencing simultaneously. I remembered the brakes failing in one of the cars and having to avoid hitting other oncoming traffic who were yelling at me without being able to stop it. But in order to best honor the spirit of this question, I consulted my archived dream entries and found one called Scariest Dream Ever. Because time has riddled away a lot of the relevance of this dream, it's hard for me to remember that this was at one point in time truly worthy of the title Scariest Dream Ever. It's been so long, and I forget the terror, but here it is. So the dream begins, and I am in my room, and I notice that there are people I know that I'm not very fond of outside, below my window at ground level. But it doesn't really matter too much at this point. I'm probably using my computer. It's not really clear what I'm doing at this point in the dream, but I'm just chilling in my room. And then I see a puppet outside of my window looking in. I know it's a puppet because the bottom is held up by a stick, but it moves in an extremely animated way. It seems completely alive. It has a large foreboding face and vaguely resembles a pirate, with lots of facial hair and a curly long mustache, and these weird trinket thingies in their hair. Very Pirates of the Caribbean Captain Jack kind of look. And at first it really shocks me. But then I realize I have a similar mask on, so I consider it playful. I look at it mockingly, but then realize it can see me perfectly, as it tracks my head movement with its eyes. So it couldn't be as simple as a puppet being controlled by people at the ground level. Or it is, but it's very powerful and can see me. I realized this and began to panic a little and decided to close the curtains a bit more so that they touched the side of my face, so that from its point of view it would only see the curtains in my face and not into my room. I felt invaded by being able to look inside my room. With this gesture of my face in between the curtains, I playfully moved my head around, and then I pulled my head out and closed the curtains completely. It admittedly freaked me out slightly, but I went back to whatever I was doing before. The next time I looked to my left, where the window is, the curtains were slightly pried open, and the puppet was there watching me. I closed the curtains again. This happened a number of times. Each time I looked back, the curtains had been reopened, or slightly opened, which seemed impossible because the puppet head was on the other side of the glass, and the glass doesn't slide open, so there would be no way to reach through and open them from the outside. The next time I look over, the curtains are wide open, and there are a number of tiny gadgets attached to the peripheral edges of the window. One is obviously a camera, and the other seems to be microphones or other types of cameras. They're all very small, no bigger than a penny, with a wire that attaches to a bead-sized receiver. At this point, I'm becoming quite worked up and frantic. I rip all of these little gadgets away and shut the curtains again. I look away for a moment, and when I look back to the window, immediately the curtains are being opened. The puppet head is there, with puppet hands for the first time, that are thin and wireframe-like, that literally go through the window, which she was using to reopen the curtains. I grabbed the hands and yanked back aggressively until the arms stretched and popped off the puppet, which was still on the outside of the window, despite his arms being able to transcend through it. The puppet was looking at all of the stuff in my room, like it was examining everything, and I felt that I had no privacy whatsoever. I ran back to the window, shut the curtains around my head like the first time, and screamed in a crying way, and headbutt my head against the glass, almost without thinking, desperate for this to stop. This happened one more time, and it seemed like I was trying to take something from my shelf, but I didn't know what. I panicked, thinking of if I valued anything in this room, as it suddenly felt like it would all be taken away. I realized it was the data on the computer that I valued the most, so I grabbed the tower, which was closest to the window, and I ripped it away from the wall it was plugged into, toward the opposite side of the room, away from the window, then panically closed the curtains again. At this point, I grab a large kitchen knife and open the door from my room. Unusually, the lights are out in the hallway. I start screaming in a terrified manner and banging the knife against the walls. One of my roommates at the time comes out of her room and attempts stabbing me with her own kitchen knife. I grab her knife with my hand so that it doesn't enter my stomach, but it does cut the fingers on my left hand. I wonder briefly if they are injured bad enough to need stitches, or if I can get away with not going to the hospital. I, still panickedly, tell her that I'm not trying to kill her and that I'm not a threat, and that I'll show you why I'm freaking out. And I open the door to my room, and the phenomenon is happening again. At this time, my other roommate is also now with us. There are small cameras that have been placed in the room again, which I knock over, and I decide to close the curtains again. I run back to the opposite side of the room, where the door is. I grab the computer tower and rip out the hard drives, still freaking out, but I know at least my two roommates are here. I say something to them panickedly, like, "See what's going on?" I check my phone, which is on the ground, pressing it with my toe, and see that it is 4 a.m. I quickly move into the kitchen, trying to calm down for once. A loud banging sound is heard from the opposite end of the hallway, and the door immediately is broken open. At first, it seems like some sort of authority figure is bringing people in, but then it is clearly a strange hodgepodge group of people that looks like a gang out of the Matrix or something. The head boss looked kind of like Naomi from the Matrix, but in a wheelchair. They pull into our kitchen, all obviously looking at me. I freak out again, worried they're gonna kill me, and say something like, "Whatever it is, it's not me. I'm innocent. I'm not a threat. I'm just a normal person." The leader says they're going to release my porn catalog extensively and successfully. As soon as I realize what they're threatening, I panic and say, "I've never recorded or done porn, I'm a virgin." But then I almost instantly realize what they're threatening, that they've attached my face to porn videos to look indistinguishable from me, so that it seems that it really is me in the porn. I feel insane, still panicking, trotting around the room, but then for a moment I have some brief hope, realizing who cares if I become known for being a porn actor? And I explained to one of the girls in this thug group, extremely close to her ear, as an expression of my unhingedness, "Why should I care? Everyone will just think I fuck a lot." And then they reveal to me that it will be a gay porn catalog. I jet back to my room and see a large technologically imbued monolith like rock that covers the entire view, rising up behind the window. Everyone is crowded around me, looking out the window, watching. This strange rock keeps rising and changing form, almost looking like a technological alien city for a moment. This happens until the view outside of the window completely evolves into another environment. There are tall citadel and obelisk-like dark structures with a dark purple starry background. A large eye is closest in view with a number of vague alien figures around it, and a large blue hollow cylindrical shaped gun. They threateningly pointed the gun, which seemed to cut through the window like water, at each of us, until they pointed it at me. The main alien was giving a speech like, "Finally, the energy of the person that excites us most," when it was pointed at me. I said, "It's not me, I'm useless." Or something like useless. They immediately pointed their gun to this baby to the left of me, which I instinctively knew was the clueless youngest child of a wealthy mother, the most ironic choice for this sacrifice of great intelligence, as the aliens mentioned. The blast of teal color energy made the baby disappear as they fired their weapon.
My name is and I have some interesting questions for you. What do you do moments that we can really record ourselves? Sucking question!
What are your favorite games outside of Team Fortress 2?
Thank you for listening. Casualty F2.
When I write the lyrics for my TF2 songs, I try to first put myself in the feeling that I want to embody. I try to feel the mood of how I want the song to feel before I actually finish it. It's like trying on a pair of pants, but you have to imagine that you're wearing the pants and really take on the role. Once I'm starting to center myself in those intended emotions, I just take on the character and speak as if I were them. It's hard to imagine what someone who's feeling really melancholy about TF2 would naturally say if you're disconnected from that feeling. So you pretend to be that melancholy feeling about TF2, and then if you really give into it, like method acting, you start to not be able to tell the difference between pretending those feelings and actually feeling those feelings. Then it becomes easy to come up with lyrics and phrases that really express that feeling in an exciting way. The lyric "Don't Tell Me How I Feel" in the TF2 emo song isn't even TF2 related, but when I was really trying to put myself in the emotional space of the piece, those were the words that just came naturally to my mind and expressed that kind of angst I was going for. And just to hit your second question real quick, my favorite games outside of TF2 are Deus Ex, Minecraft, and Slapshot.
Hey Casual, my name is Lemo, and I was wondering if you could speak on entropy and your opinion on it. Thanks.
I have to say I'm a bit rusty on the subject, as most of what I know about entropy comes from the book The Fabric of the Cosmos by Brian Greene, which I read almost 4 years ago. So please forgive me if I betray the truth with my imperfect memory, but this was my takeaway of entropy when I first read the book. So entropy is the phenomenon of systems devolving into chaos, unpredictability, randomness, And the more complex and large a system becomes, the larger its chances become to fall apart and devolve into that randomness. When I think about it now, it becomes very messy in my mind in regards to how much of the theory depends on certain conceptualizations that I believe are more of a human attempt to make sense of reality than indicative of reality itself. But when I first read about entropy, what amazed me about it was how humans seem to defy this trend. The larger a system becomes, the more inclined it is to fall into disorder. Yet humans seem to be able to achieve the opposite. Our society, our systems, our technology, our economies all become larger, more complex, and more interconnected as time goes on. Yet it seems that instead of this increasing the propensity for it to devolve, it just makes it more stable. We have a sense of this when we call something too big to fail, and it's honestly how I feel looking at the world. As the world becomes more interconnected, more interdependent, more complex, it seems like there is more pressure for us who have to live in it, and more desire for us to quit that system. But overall, less likelihood for the system to change. For starters, even if the pressure of maintaining the system is incredibly high for us, we would need an exorbitant percentage of the population to be snapping under this pressure for any kind of mass exodus from the system to actually destroy it. And before it would even reach that point, there would surely be adaptations of the system to prevent people from snapping under pressure. The interconnectedness of the system makes any sudden retaliation, rebellion, or retirement of one of its entities relatively inconsequential. When you depend on a single source for anything, it is easy for that source to suddenly change their protocol and hurl you into a world of chaos. But humans seem to continue evolving towards a world that provides a variety of sources for everything, making the overall system incredibly stable. I think of it like torrenting. Torrenting is powerful because instead of downloading everything that you need from one source, you download what you need in segments from every source that is able to provide it. In a traditional file sharing system with a centralized host, like Mega Upload, let's say, if Mega Upload goes down, you're forced into this difficult situation where you're no longer able to download what you needed. With torrenting, any single seeder can leave the system and doesn't really affect your ability to download the file. Of course, the torrent is still being hosted by a central source that routes the connections, but you understand my point. It's like if you have the option of a dozen groceries. If one grocery closes, you still have food. I predict the future of our civilization to become increasingly large, increasingly complex, increasingly interconnected, and increasingly stable. I would say that as humanity grows, we continue to convert disorder into order against that natural flow of entropy. But in the end, I seriously question the validity of concepts like order and disorder. I think they're useful tools, but they're ultimately tools of human creation and not objective natural qualities of reality. The difference between a set of items being in order and in disorder is a human distinction.
Hello, Casual TF2. My name is Kyler. My question is pretty simple. Are you going to make another video that's similar to the How It Feels to Play Medic video? Because it's one of my favorite videos that you've put out, possibly one of my most favorite videos as far as TF2 related YouTube content goes. It's very unique, very interesting. It's quite, the analysis is quite deep, which I think added a lot to the humor of the video, and the editing style is quite unique. So all in all, very special. Shut the fuck up, mate! All in all, very, very special, and it'd be cool to see you produce something like that again.
Yes, Kyler, I definitely will. Most of my video ideas brew in my mind for a long time, until I either can't bear that they don't exist and make them, or I forget about them, leaving them forever unborn. And I've certainly thought of a spiritual successor to How It Feels to Play Medic, and all I can say is I hope I get it to you soon enough. With that video, I really had the mindset of being okay with using all of my tricks in one video. Sometimes it feels natural to avoid giving away all of your good ideas or points of philosophical intrigue in a single work, but with that video, I tried the opposite and just wanted to pour every extreme concept into it that I could. I wanted the spiritual epiphany, the sex, the drugs, the mental unraveling, the horrifying, and the beautiful. And when I make a video in a similar style, I'll be aiming to do something like that, to tie in big ideas from as many different fields as possible, and express as many distinct emotions as I can from start to finish.
Another question. Favorite album? What is it? Maybe favorite 5 albums, favorite 3, favorite 10. I don't know, whatever's most appropriate for the video. Even if you maybe you don't have a favorite singular album, maybe most favorite in recent times. Whatever makes the question most feasible to answer.
Now this is a really hard question, as I will inevitably miss out on so many great artists, but I did my best. The albums that I've probably listened to the most in my life and have impacted me the most consequentially are Distal by Crash of Rhinos, Siderali by The Little Explorer, and Serenading by Mineral, Second Stage Turbine Blade by Coheed and Cambria, Milk by Kim Hjorthy, Patterns for Feelings by Polaroid Summer, this long title Gazette 3-track EP thing, Escape from the Underground, Don't Want to Escape from the Underground, Can't Escape from the Underground by Killy, Nobody Here by Math Bonus, The Flag of Punishment by Golnarius, Croesus by Obscura, Relentless Mutation by Archspire, and Psalms of the Moribund by Defeated Sanity. all of these artists. They have one or two other releases that I've listened to nearly as much as the ones I mentioned, and also really, really like a lot. But these were the most important releases for me, hands down.
Right, this is a simple question. I feel that it needs to be asked of every individual. Feel free to subvert the binary I provide in this question, but to get into it, tits or ass, which do you prefer and why? Like I said, feel free to subvert that binary. Maybe there's a other body part you find more appealing than the two that I just suggested, but there you go.
I really draw a blank to this question, and I don't have an instinctual answer. I think both tits and ass are a circumstantial thing for me. I feel like both can be done great, and both can also be done poorly in terms of their composition, form, lighting, presentation, etc. Swaying loyalty to one or the other would feel dishonest because I don't really glorify either of them as a concept, and I'm concerned a lot with their context. I would also say I'm a big fan of hands, but there's a similar issue because I find some hands very aesthetic and some hands the opposite. I appreciate you appending the detail in your question that this may be a forced binary, and I am granted the power to transcend that. I think we so often see things in this black or white way, tits or ass. Why not both?
Hey Casual, my name's Elijah. My question for you is, what are you scared of?
What am I scared of? I am certainly scared of losing control of my body and being forced to do things with my body I don't want to do, and being tortured or something like that. I used to be afraid of not living up to my potential and of being publicly humiliated. But after some nightmares and sleep paralysis experiences with the aforementioned theme, those things don't really seem scary anymore.
Hey, I'm Deck, and this is my question. So I was wondering, because I was starting to browse around more of your channel, and I realized there's a couple of music-related stuff, at least from what I've seen. So I was wondering, what's your favorite type of unorthodox music? Any type at all you want to mention about? Because I saw the power metal montage with the nature clips, and that was pretty funny and amazing to watch. So yeah, just go ahead and describe anything, I guess.
My favorite type of unorthodox music is probably brutal death metal. And probably because it's what I've been enjoying the most this year. There are a few things I really like about it. Much of it is characterized by an obsession with speed, complexity, and dissonance. I think all of which make the music incredibly surprising and dense to listen to. I still enjoy plenty of simple, easy-to-digest music, even stuff that's extremely repetitive or just straight-up drone. But I often have a craving that can only be satisfied by music that feels like a lot to chew through, that gives me a lot of different elements to focus on and is fast and chaotic enough to prevent me from ever feeling like I know exactly what's going to happen next. I also like that it has this sense of going at 110% intensity the entire time. And while there are some brutal death metal bands who are more experimental and have occasional sections that let the composition breathe a bit, most of my favorites, and I think those that really embody the typical technical brutal death sound, just run at constant power the entire time. There's something abstract and primal that I can appreciate in brutal death metal with bands like Putridity or Defeated Sanity that I don't find in strictly technical death metal bands like Obscura or Archspire, even though you can argue they are equally fast or complex. Brutal death metal's devotion to a dissonant chromatic sound, usually using all 12 notes, contributes greatly to this unique atmosphere. And I don't find that melodic trend tiresome, unlike the uneasiness I may feel in listening to a 12-tone piano composition. Additionally, the production techniques of the genre often favor a less clean and polished approach than technical death metal, for instance, which lends itself to the sense of the drums, bass, guitars, and vocals all contributing to the same chaotic onslaught of aggression that can almost smear together at the edges. It took me a long time to understand the appeal of this kind of music, but now that I'm here, it just activates something so satisfying in me. There is an emotional quality to speed, and brutal death metal indulges in that feeling plentifully. Also, whatever genre Supersilent is, I think is incredibly cool. I guess they would be categorized as improvisational music that uses acoustic and electronic instrumentation, but there's like one other band that sounds like them, to my knowledge, called Moha, who were clearly inspired by them. Similar to brutal death metal, but with a totally different strategy, I love the feeling of unpredictability and chaos their music brings. It gives me something to focus into fully and be pushed and pulled around by.
Hey Casual, I would like to ask you about your thoughts on the subtle trauma of innocence in Western society, wherein a child's first experiences in this world often consist of being lied to about many aspects of reality by their parents, and how the way that they're infantilized continues even as they grow older in many cases.
This is definitely a loaded question I could see going in many directions, so apologies in advance if I can't seem to address everything. First, let's talk about innocence and being lied to as a child. On one hand, the more I've appreciated the power of understanding your developmental psychology and how your experiences growing up molded you into the person that you are now, in many dysfunctional ways, the more I see childhood as a delicate thing that you want to be careful with, and you want to be careful how you interact with children. It seems to me that the earlier on a traumatic experience happens for a person, the stronger the ripple effect will be that it has through their life. So in a sense, I understand where parents get this instinct to shelter their children from certain harsh realities of life. But unfortunately, this method can also backfire, that by lying to your children about certain things, it's only setting them up for trauma when they realize that they have been lied to. Consider a seemingly harmless childhood myth like Santa Claus or the Tooth Fairy. I personally remember being devastated when I discovered that Santa Claus didn't exist, and it was just my parents putting presents under the tree. I was most upset because I was lied to by the people who I depended on and trusted for everything. Of course, it seems quite petty when we look back at a memory like that. But now, consider more serious situations, when parents lie to their children to relieve themselves of a difficult explanation. Imagine that a child's pet has died, and instead of the parent explaining to the child that it died, they say that it went on vacation. The child will inevitably realize the truth, and be devastated when they realize they were denied that truth. And this brings us to the next important piece of the equation, which is this idea of infantilization. By treating your child like a child, they can become more like a child. If a parent always shelters their child from certain things and tells the kid that they aren't ready for it, they are essentially programming their offspring to believe that they aren't capable of facing certain truths or handling certain situations, which can carry on in a disastrous way into adulthood. Imagine a parent is presented with the first opportunity to explain to their child that meat comes from an animal's flesh. But instead, they lie and say that it is made in a lab by scientists. There's sufficient argument to say that the only reason the child will inevitably be traumatized by the truth that it comes from a dead animal and not a pristine laboratory is because they were taught that it wasn't. We have this sense that children need to be sheltered and protected from harsh truths, but maybe the truths aren't actually harsh if they're just presented to the child in a matter-of-fact way that treats the child as mature and capable of handling the reality of the circumstance. Some trauma is unavoidable in childhood, as it's a part of all life. Their pet may die. Their grandmother may die. They may get bullied at school. And those experiences will be painful. But they only rip the rug out from underneath the kid if those experiences were contradictory to the way that they were taught the world works. Telling a child that if they try their best, they will succeed seems like a good-hearted way to motivate them into giving it their all. But it's also just not true. I think there are a lot of subtle lies like this that we are told by our parents again and again that seem totally harmless, but what happens when that kid does try their best and they don't succeed? That's traumatic. Then they feel like there's something wrong with them, or that their best wasn't enough, or it wasn't even really their best, or that the world is playing some kind of cruel joke on them. It goes against their expectation of how they were taught reality works. It almost seems cold or depressing to imagine a parent telling their child that you can try your best and still fail. But that's the truth, isn't it? It makes me think of the phrase, "The road to hell is paved with good intentions." Most parents don't try to traumatize their children. Most parents wouldn't lie to their children if they didn't think it was harmless. And this kind of infantilization goes beyond what parents tell their children, but extends to what children are allowed to do and how children are trusted with almost no responsibilities in society. That's not to say we need to be giving children desk jobs, but consider that much of our attitude about children being foolish and unreliable comes from our culture treating them like that. If you trust a child with no responsibilities, of course they won't be responsible. I've been thinking a lot about how violence is glamorized in our society, how it's been made into something special and horrific. In the same way we glamorize or demonize, depending on your perspective, death. It's made out to be a very horrible and traumatic thing in all of our culture and entertainment. But if you think about how humans lived for the majority of our history, before there was civilization, as animals, and how other animals live, death and violence are just parts of life. I don't think they were nearly as glamorized or specialized as they have become today. And I think the same can be said of nudity.
Hey Casual, this is Dougie. My question is, if you could have one free act of revenge, what would you do?
I would use my one free act of revenge, my free active revenge, to prevent Dreams, legal name Andrea Herd, from making the infamous truck deal with Yowman in Survivor Fiji from 2006. So here's the timeline of what actually happened. In the immunity challenge, which could grant one of the 4 remaining competitors immunity from the final vote that happens between each other before the final 3 players go on to be judged by the jury, who determine the sole survivor. And in that immunity challenge, Dreams won. However, just before, in the previous reward challenge, Yowman won a car. But Yowman agreed to give the car to Dreams, who he knew the car meant a lot to, in exchange for Dreams giving him the immunity idol if he won that next immunity challenge.
You win the immunity for that round. You give it to me. I promise to God.
Dreams did win the next immunity challenge, but broke his promise and didn't give Yowman the idol. Yowman got voted off and missed his chance to plead his case to the jury for $1 million in the final 3. Even though Earl won, who everyone loves, it's a shame that Yowman got ousted like this at the very end, despite being the most cunning player of the season. On one hand, it is understood nowadays that your word isn't everything on Survivor, and that you can be betrayed. But at the time of Survivor Fiji, it was still far from that level of trustlessness that is expected in the game now. The thing that was so upsetting about this to me was that Dreams could have still beaten Yowman fair and square and knocked him out of the game without agreeing to this deal where he essentially took Yowman's brand new truck. but he had to have the cake and eat it too, or something like that. So, I would use my free active revenge to prevent Dreams from winning that immunity challenge. Or worse, I would tamper with the results so that instead of Yowman winning the car, Earl wins the car from the reward challenge, preventing the car deal from ever happening in the first place. And then you also make Yowman win the immunity challenge and vote off Dreams. Maybe it wasn't implied in the question that I could go back and interfere with past events with my free revenge. And if that's the case, I'd probably go vandalize Dream's famous Survivor 2008 Ford Super Duty. This concludes part 1 of this 2-part Q&A saga. Let me know what's going through your head right now in the comments, and I'll see you in part 2.